Welcome to the One Moment Longer podcast presented by AnyQuestion. I'm your host, Greg Bennett, and this was a delightful conversation with an incredible athlete and even a more remarkable human being, Jessie Diggins. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did, and remember, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer.
The U.S. and Norway coming to the line. Here comes Diggins on the outside. Diggins making the play around Sweden. Jessie Diggins to the line. And it is Jessie Diggins delivering a landmark moment that will be etched in U.S. Olympic history. The first ever cross-country gold medal for the U.S.
I'm Jessie Diggins. This is the One Moment Longer podcast with Greg Bennett. Any questions?
All right. Today I am joined by one of the world's all-time greatest cross-country skiers, an American legend who embodies the spirit of this show and is the definition of the show's mantra, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer. She's a 3-time Olympic medalist with a gold, silver and bronze, a 6-time World Championship medalist with 2 gold, 2 silver and 2 bronze, and the first American to win the overall cross-country World Cup title. She has consistently shown that pushing through one moment longer can lead to greatness, breaking barriers, and making history in the sport. Hailing from Minnesota, she has inspired a generation of athletes and advocated for important causes like mental health and environmental conservation. Her must-read book, Brave Enough, details her incredible journey, sharing not only her athletic accomplishments, but also her personal struggles with bulimia, giving readers a glimpse into the resilience and strength it took for her to endure and reach the pinnacle of her sport. Most recently, she won the World Championships in Slovenia, becoming the first ever American to win an individual World Championship gold in cross-country skiing. Yet another testament to her enduring spirit. It's an honor and a privilege to have her join me today. So welcome. And thanks for joining me on the One Moment Longer podcast, Jessie Diggins. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
My goodness, that was an endurance intro. You've been busy. I'm exhausted.
Camera because I'm blushing over here. My goodness.
I was like, I've got to tell you, I do homework, for everybody that comes on the show, and this one was just so fantastic. Honestly, this morning I woke up at about, I'm an early riser, but I woke up about 2:30 and I started watching videos and YouTube and everything, and I went off to the gym a couple of hours later and I just smashed the treadmill after watching your 2018 gold medal performance. Was absolutely amazing. So it's been a lot of fun doing homework for this show.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm honored. Oh, gosh. I don't really know what to say to that.
No, we'll keep moving. But where are you at the moment? Where are you currently living? Because I've heard you quoted saying you don't live anywhere, really. You're just always everywhere.
Yeah. So, and that's so true. I figured out that this spring, it was my first time sleeping in the same bed for 3 weeks since last August, which is quite the streak of bouncing around.
Wow.
But right now I am in South Boston, or Southie, the locals call it. My husband, Wade, and I have a condo here, a little place not too far from the beach, not too far from downtown where he works. And so it's just been an awesome juxtaposition from, where I train in Stratton, Vermont with our club, where you're out and you're up on Stratton Mountain and it's so peaceful and quiet and you've got the woods surrounding you. And then you get this chunk of time in the spring where you're in the city and you're going out to dinner, going for runs along the beach. It's a very different feeling, a very different kind of living, but I love having a little taste of it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, but I go up to Boston every 2 to 3 weeks. That's where our team are at AnyQuestion. And honestly, just running along the Charles River and going up, because I live in Florida. And so to go up there and run and not feel like I'm dying, and just it's so beautiful. Like you said, the bars and the restaurants, it's nice to break it up. How much more time do you have there before you get back into work? Are you on a break, I guess?
Yeah. So our season ended on March 27th. It was a little bit longer season this year. We started racing around Thanksgiving weekend, and then we just ended at the end of March. And then, and by then I was pretty ready to come home, and I was really, really missing Wade and missing being home. So I came back and had a nice break. I gave myself a week and a half of totally being off, like nothing, no training, no getting the heart rate up, nothing beyond walking.
1.5 weeks, that's what you get. That's nice. Only 1.5 weeks.
I mean, I could have taken longer, but after that, I started to feel the itch of I really want to go out and I want to try to learn how to play tennis, and, I want to go for a jog, or I want to go do this or go do that. And so then I allowed myself to get back into it, but it felt really nice to have a little bit of a break. And then pretty soon here, I'm going to be hitting the road again. We got our first U.S. ski team training camp of the season coming up, which is so cool because you have all these young athletes who are new to the team. So you get a chance to meet your teammates and get on snow again. We always go out to Bend, Oregon, because they preserve a ton of snow up at Mount Bachelor from a great season. They keep the snow up there so much longer. So it's a really awesome training camp, and going to go up there and do a ton of skiing.
Wow. And wait, you said your husband, Wade, he doesn't travel with you, or does he join you for little bits? Or are you on your own?
More like little bits. I wish, we both wish that he could be, on the road more, but he works in finance, and it's pretty demanding of his time. And so we'll kind of pick and choose when he can come over to Europe. And, this last season he came over for the end of the tour to ski and got to be there with the coach bib on and holding square poles up on the side of the mountain for the final climb, which was a super iconic race that he's seen me do on TV a number of times. And it was so cool for him to be there in person. So, and then in the summer we bounced back between Stratton and Boston. Nice.
Yeah. It's not easy when you got loved ones and you got to hit the road for months at a time, and do you find that takes its toll? I mean, how do you manage that? I guess now with FaceTime and being able to see each other for little bits, it's okay. But is it just about, this is my time, I got to just put my head down? How do you manage it?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. Before we had video calling, this was so tough. I mean, I distinctly remember my first trip to World Juniors. I had a calling card, and I went to the basement of our hotel in France to use the phone in the basement and dial it up and do this whole process so I could call my parents and say, "Hey, I made it! I'm alive. Yeah. I'm doing great." And I remember that was really challenging, and I have so much respect for athletes who did this before you had the ability to be like, I'm just going to call you right now, and I get to see your face. And, we get to have this, virtual face-to-face interaction, because that has been huge for us in our relationship, being able to carve out this time every day where we just talk and we connect and we talk about our day and what's going on in the world. And he makes me laugh so much. And it is honestly really tough being gone. I think that's the hardest thing about my job, honestly. Racing's hard. Yeah, training's hard, but not really. What's hard is being away from Wade, being away from family, friends, all my loved ones. But, I love that I feel so supported by Wade, by my parents, by his family, his parents. First of all, they see that I love what I do, and that, this is the kind of the prime years of my career, and they're happy for me because of that. But even more importantly, they see that, doing this gives you this platform to work with Protect Our Winters and talk about climate change, to support the mission of Share Winter and getting kids on snow for the first time to learn a sport. And, this helps you work with the Emily program and encourage people to, prioritize mental health alongside their physical health. And they're so supportive of all the work that I can do. And I can do this work for the rest of my life. And I plan to do it for the rest of my life. life. But doing it with the platform that racing internationally gives me, that message goes so much further than it would without ski racing, right? So I kind of feel like, this is such an opportunity in this window of time when I get to be on podcasts like this, and when I get to, when the Olympics rolls around and suddenly, everyone in the US is so focused on the Winter Olympics, I'm like, ooh, this is a great time to get these messages out there because people are really listening, like this is my chance to try to impact someone's life in a positive way. So I feel like skiing is really challenging in that, you have to be away because most of our World Cups are in Europe, but there's so many other things that it brings that we've kind of decided, okay, for the short term, this is definitely something that we want to keep in our lives. And I do say our lives because it impacts Wade so much, but ski racing isn't forever. There's a lifespan to this career for sure.
I hear it in your voice and the way you speak. And it's like when you find somebody living their life with purpose, right? There's At the end of the day, purpose is everything. Once your passion collides with your strengths and you can go all in on something, it's like, and you find that purpose, it's like, wow, this is a moment that you've just got to grab and hold on to. And in sport, all of us that were professional athletes or whatever, we know there's a time, there's going to be a time we just happen to slow down or our passion just starts to leave us, right? It's like, I don't want to get up and do this, or I don't want to travel, or I don't like to suffer anymore. And you'll have that, I call it the Forrest Gump moment. Do you know the movie Forrest Gump?
Yeah, when he just stops running.
Exactly. He's running around America and across America backwards and forwards, and then one day he just goes, I think I'm done now, right? And and for me, that's how I retired. It was kind of like I was 44, the bucket was empty, and I'm like, I don't want to suffer anymore. I've embraced and loved the suffering, and now it's like, I don't want it. And I was in Beijing. My wife was racing in Colorado, and I called her. I'm like, I'm done now. If you can be lucky enough to choose when you stop and then go, okay, I live with purpose now. I've got to find, and you'll have your purpose, like you said, with your projects that you've already got going. And I think that's fantastic that you've got those in place, which is absolutely fantastic. But I want to ask you, you just won the World Championships. How was that? How are you feeling? Have you come down from that, the first ever American to win a gold medal at the World Championship, individual gold medal at the World Championships?
Oh, man. It's a funny question because my natural tendency is to just focus on the next race and prepare because I don't know if it's like fear that I'll be complacent or that it will rub it in the face of a teammate who didn't have a good day, you don't want to be that asshole who's like, me. And sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this.
That was awesome.
Edit that out. Especially at World Championships, the races are packed in so closely together, right? Like it's almost every other day. And so it's like, okay, I got to be ready for the team relay. Like that was the next thing. And I did this at the 2018 Olympics. It's funny because, we won the race, Kikkan and I, we won the team sprint. And right away I was just like, oh, I gotta get dry clothes. I gotta recover. And I can't remember if I'm sure it was Wade and my mom and dad, who were all of them just like, hang on. You just won the Olympics. You're going to be fine for the next race. You know what to do. It's all automatic. You're going to recover. Just breathe, enjoy this. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. I should enjoy this. And so I've tried really hard to allow myself to also enjoy it, in a courteous way, not rubbing it into anyone else. But I don't want to just blow through that moment and not take the time to celebrate it, particularly with, the coaches, the wax technicians, the staff, volunteers who are over there working their faces off to give us this opportunity to perform at our best. And I don't want to not take the time. So this year it was so fun. Like we I mean, I cried like at least 12 times that day when I won the gold. And I mean, I literally like sobbed like a baby while like hugging my longtime coach and wax tech, Jason Court, because he's worked with me since I was like 17 years old.
Wow.
So it was just like super emotional. And then I cried on TV at multiple different interviews, which I hate doing. I hate crying on TV. So it's not on purpose. It was very genuine. And then the coolest thing was I went to the wax truck and we had this awesome group hug, at which point I cried again. And just celebrating with them and seeing the traditions that they do in the truck. Because honestly, usually by the time they're doing that, we're gone, we're home, because we've got to get on the massage table for a flush. We've got to go for a jog. We've got to, I have this whole like post-race debrief report that I fill out with my sports psychologist. It's like, bam, 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 you're doing the next thing. And that day I stayed in the truck and I saw them do their shot of Jägermeister, or maybe it's Akavit. It's gross, whatever it is. And they all do a shot together. And then there's this one song they play and they blast it. And so like later when the Finns had a great day and they got a relay medal, they were blasting their song, like all the trucks will like blast the song when they win, or maybe not all of them, but certain trucks from certain nations will have like these rituals that they do. And then the Solomon guys, because I'm a Solomon skier, they borrowed from the Italians one of those sound machines with a button that goes burr, burr, burr. And they were like just blasting music out the window. It was just this super cool atmosphere of celebration and like, wow, we did this thing that we've been working towards for literally generations, like since the start of U.S. cross-country skiing, we've been building up towards this. And so it wasn't lost on me that like this really meant so much, not just to me, but to all the people who have paved this path for me. And I'm so grateful. And that's probably what brought me to tears the 12th time. So it was just super cool. And I'm still enjoying it because it's funny. I have this weird, I don't know what the word for it is, but this thing where I don't like display my Olympic medals. They're in a sack. They're like wrapped in little hats. And, I currently have them all packed up to take to Minnesota for some talks I'm going to do later and get to, try to inspire people with them. But I don't look at them. And it's because every day I want to earn the right to be proud of who I am and what I did that day. And it's like, ski racing is awesome. It's super fun. Of course you want to win, but winning doesn't give you like a hall pass for the rest of your life. It's not like, I'm a great person forever.
Don't you wish so?
Like it's not that. Like you have to go out and be a good person and do something good every day so that at least that's what I tell myself. So that when I fall asleep, I'm like, hey, I did this thing today. Like maybe I did some brainstorming with the Protect Our Winners team and I tried to, figure out how I can be more effective there. Maybe I called up my senator and said, I really want you to support climate advocacy in your the next time you get a vote. Thank you so much. I want to do something every day where I feel really proud of what I did. And it may be connected to athletics, but it's maybe potentially more meaningful if it's not. Because that's something I can do every day. You don't get a chance to win the world championships every day, but you do get a chance to like go out and like give someone a genuine compliment and light up their day. And like kindness is free, So
well said.
I don't know. That's just the way I think about it. But I also don't want to not let myself celebrate a lifetime milestone either. I don't want to swing too far the other direction. So that's what I'm trying to balance.
Well said. Well said. I loved everything about that. And I think I've had numerous guests on the show, whether they be world or Olympic champions, and often their biggest regrets when I say, what's some of your regrets? It's like, I didn't celebrate that moment. I moved to the next one because it's in an athlete's DNA. Like you said, you have your system, you have your process, you know what comes next, and you live by systems and processes, right? And it's like, and the next goal, and where am I going? And sometimes you just need somebody to put you in your place and say, hey, just sit and let this sink in just for a moment. and embrace it with everybody around you. And I've had so many guests that say, yeah, I missed, I got 5 world titles, but I didn't celebrate the first 4. And finally I celebrated the 5th, but I kind of wish I'd done da-da-la-la. And I'm like, yeah, that's something you learn through age and wisdom. And by the way, I've cried like a baby apparently on TV. I remember qualifying for an Olympics, and it just had been so stressful to get there. And they shoved a camera in my face right as I crossed the finishing line, which wasn't fair. I was exhausted. I was absolutely exhausted. And then the front page of the newspapers are like, and Bennett cried like a baby. I was like, well, that was a bit harsh.
Honestly, I always get like, I've tried sometimes to keep one last little wall up around myself to protect myself, because you have no control over what gets shown and what pictures are taken of you and what someone else decides to say about you, right? But at the same time, people are smart and they can make their own conclusions when they see an interview or a story. They can usually see like, here's what I think happened and what I think is going on here. And the more genuine I have allowed myself to be, or I guess not genuine, vulnerable, I guess is the word, because it's always genuine, but how much of myself am I going to share with people? And over the years, I've just leaned into sharing more and more, because I've found that in that vulnerability, in that moment where you're just so relieved and it's been so hard and you were just like done, like I made it. I did this thing that was so freaking hard. It took so much sacrifice and so much blood, sweat, and tears, and you let yourself cry, and people can relate to that because everyone has something in their life that was so hard, and making it to the end of it was just such a relief. And I think there's something so human and universal about that. So I think it's always hard when you're like, well, maybe I wouldn't have chosen for a camera to be in my face at this moment. But at the same time, showing that is, I think, really, really cool, because more men need to see that it's okay to cry and have emotions and to feel passionately about anything. I think that's so awesome.
I've got so much I want to dive into here with you. But before I do, I want to just recognize you and how amazing you've been on the AnyQuestion platform. You have 140 answers already on there. And just want to quickly ask you, what's that experience been like for you?
I mean, I think it's really cool that anyone can have a chance to ask me a question in a very, I guess the word I'm searching for is a very personal way. Like it's a video. It's just me talking. I'm not staged. I haven't rehearsed the answer a bunch of times. It's just my genuine, here's what I think about this. Here's how I feel about XYZ. Here's my answer to your question. And I'm not going to overthink it or whatever. It's just very genuine. And so you're going to get a very genuine response and connection. And I think that's so cool, because a lot of the times people might have similar questions, like, what do you think about this mode of training? Or what's your recommendation for someone skiing for the first time? Or, what's the best way to get the glitter on your cheeks to stick on race day? These are very common questions. And I feel like it's really cool to be able to send that out on the platform, and then multiple people can see it and think, oh, I hadn't even thought to ask that. But now that I see that, well, I do really want to learn, this or that. And not just from me, but from all these experts in so many different fields and sports and strength, conditioning, nutrition, all these different things. So I think that has been a really cool resource. Yeah. And honestly, also like a source of inspiration. And at the end of the day, I think what it also does, I don't know if this was the intent, but it just humanizes people. And you see that, Caleb Dressel, he's a human. And he, has thoughts and opinions and all different ideas about training and stuff, just like anybody else. And I think it really allows you to kind of make that connection with people who are experts in their field. But at the end of the day, they're just people too. Mm-hmm.
I love it. And I think for people that want to go check out, your answers, go check it out. It's your responses, I was telling you before the show, have been some of the most inspiring and authentic and vulnerable on the platform. So big thank you from me and the team for the amazing content. But let's move on. I want to know, I want to rewind your journey. I want to go back and tell me, when did you discover your passion for cross-country skiing and elite sport as a whole?
Yeah, well, I guess that's actually a great question because they're kind of the same thing, but not really. Because I discovered my passion for skiing just very naturally, I would say, because my parents were really into it. So we joined the Minnesota Youth Ski League. And, before that even, I was in their backpack when they would go skiing at a different park every weekend. They'd just, put me in their backpack and give me a box of raisins to munch on. And I was just so happy. And I just thought it was, this is, of course, doesn't everyone grow up like this, gliding around in a backpack in the woods on the weekends? Like, I thought it was so cool, and it is cool. I was so fortunate. And then with the Minnesota Youth Ski League, it was like, playing tag on skis and doing scavenger hunts to find stuffed animals hidden in the trees on the trails, and and going sledding afterwards and drinking hot chocolate. So it was just really all about the experience of loving the sport and really just loving being outside in the winter. You've got kind of two camps of people who are like, oh, I love winter. It's such a different opportunity. I get to move in a different way, like skiing or snowboarding or cross country skiing, where you're sliding on the snow. It's so cool. It's beautiful. I can transport myself on all these amazing trails and go see a frozen waterfall and all this. And then you have people who are like, oh, I really don't like the winter. And I think if everyone got a chance to find a way that they enjoy being outside in the winter, it's just so beautiful and magical. And so that's something that skiing brought to my life, and I'm really grateful for it. On a competitive side, I was a kid with a ton of energy, like maybe too much energy. And so my parents were like, we gotta put her in sports. We needed a way to tire her out. So I did gymnastics for a year. I did swimming. I did track and field and wanted to try everything. Like I tried shot put, triple jump, hurdles, pole vaulting, like everything. Was really into the relays, and I played soccer, and a lot of them I wasn't, I've never been like the best at the hand-eye coordination, like where you actually have to kick something or throw or catch. But I found like, wow, I really like, running to the soccer ball. I'm not sure really what to do when I get there, but I can get there. Oh, maybe I'm more on the endurance side of things. Huh? And so it kind of came together that way, where I just realized I really love the feeling of pushing my body, especially when it's for a team, right? So I used to swim in high school, and it was like, being part of a relay was super intriguing to me. And then when I joined the cross country team, it was like, oh, you're scoring points to help your team win the meet. So it's an individual sport, but not really. Like you're trying to get points for your team, and you're training together, and you're pushing each other and encouraging each other, to finish the whole interval set and really dig deep. And I thought that was so cool. And so that's kind of where my passion for it grew. And I started to realize, skiing's the thing that, I'm best at in terms of results, at least. And that's also where I just love the team culture. It's super inclusive and positive and just like really wholesome, like all the cross country skier kids, we were all a bunch of dorks. We were getting like A's and B's in class and like all American and all this stuff. And so it was just like all these super driven, kind souls who just were really interested in seeing how far they could push themselves. And I really thought like, wow, what a cool place to be. Like, I really want to surround myself with these people. And that's kind of where it started.
I love when you say you love pushing yourself. I after watching probably several hours of you racing around the world over the last couple of days, you seem to be somebody that loves to dig so deep that you almost embrace the suffering to a level I haven't seen many people hit, to be honest. And I'm really curious. It's like this pushing yourself, this embracing the suffering. Where do you think this comes from? Like, is there a deeper meaning to it, or are you just incredibly competitive and just love to look over the edge?
That's a great question, because it's interesting. I'm competitive, I mean, for sure, right? You wouldn't be racing the World Cup if you had no desire to win. So that's kind of an obvious answer. But it's interesting because I'm competitive, but not necessarily like, oh, I want to beat you. It's more like, I want to beat me from 5 minutes ago and me from yesterday and me from last year. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Like you'll have some athletes where you get a mass start and it's head to head, and that's what pulls out their best performances. My best performances are in individual start races where I'm skiing alone with nobody around me, because I'm trying to beat the course. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to beat the clock. I'm trying to beat my previous best. It's not necessarily about beating anybody else. And in fact, I'm quite good friends with a lot of different athletes on the World Cup. I really admire them, respect them. I like them a lot. And so when they have a great day, like my happiness for them, it really is genuine because also I know what it took for them to get there. Right. I'm like, oh, I know. And they had to suffer. Like they really earned this. They really worked for this. And obviously the same with all my teammates, and I'm there seeing them and training and encouraging them and pushing them. So it's more about me beating me. But I think a lot of that, like, I wonder how much of that is genetic, because my dad would race a lot of citizens races. He'd do the American Birkie. He'd run Grandma's Marathon, and the Twin Cities Marathon in Minnesota. And, he did, again, endurance sport based and sports that were, you pushing you, right? And it's funny because when I see pictures of him racing and pictures of me racing, we make the exact same face, like same expression, same, gasping for air. And that might be the sports induced asthma that I also got from him. But we look the exact same. And he is the toughest person I know. Like he and my mom, they're both, and I don't mean tough, like just plow through something stubbornly, they're very, very smart and they're very thoughtful. But I mean, tough, like if you're not going to hurt yourself doing it and it's worthwhile to do it, they will see obstacles as like a challenge, like I'm going to make this work. I'm going to work super hard. I'm going to be super dedicated. I'm going to go for it. And I wonder if I got that, from as a kid, like watching my dad run a marathon and seeing my mom like build up a business, like, wow, like this hard work thing, like this seems to be worth it. There seems to be definite payouts for hard work. And I think that was sort of, absorbed from watching my parents. And then I also wonder how much of it is just that people feel pain in different ways, like if you, me, and 10 other people all stuck our hand in a bucket of ice water for the exact same amount of time, I feel like we would feel it differently. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just making this up, but I think the way my brain processes the pain of endurance sports, I don't like, it's not that it doesn't hurt, but when I have a strong enough reason why I'm okay with it hurting, then I can push through some pretty crazy stuff to the point where my vision will get tinted. It'll tint like yellow or pink, and I will go numb from the waist down. Like I can't feel my legs. I can move them, but I can't feel them. They're like blocks. And everything just feels like it's on fire, but I can keep moving, but only if I had a strong why. So if you stuck me in a treadmill lab setting and you were like, go until you collapse, I'd be like, no,
not do it. Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. No way. Like why, Yeah. But if you were like in a treadmill lab setting, go until you collapse, and I'll fund the entire U.S. ski team development team so they can get to every camp, I'd be like, okay, I'll do it. You know what I mean? Like if you give me a strong enough why, I can push through something crazy. Yeah. But there has to be a reason that makes sense to me in my head, which is why relays were always the thing for years and years and years. I'd pull out my best performances of my life in a relay, and I couldn't do it individually because I couldn't come up with a reason that I cared as much about my own result as when my teammates' goals and dreams were on the line. And finally, through working with my sports psychologist, it was like, you're allowed to also want to win just for you. And you're allowed to, decide it's okay and tie some other reasons in there too. Like, okay, if I push super, super hard and I win, and then I get invited to go on podcasts and do interviews, I get to talk about whatever I want. I get to talk about these messages that care to me. So suddenly you have all these things attaching to your why that make it stronger and stronger and bigger and bigger. And it helps you push through those moments where it would just be so much easier to back off just a little bit. And no one would know, nobody in the world would know that I've given 98% instead of 100 in the moment that it mattered. But I would know.
Yeah.
And I'm not cool with that.
No. Did you ever, have you had those? How many of those experiences have you had?
Oh, I've had plenty.
Yeah.
Where I haven't given 100%.
And you walk away going, I know.
Yeah. And it drives me for the next time. And sometimes it's on purpose.
Yeah.
Because to really, truly give 100% it wrecks you.
Well, there's only, I believe you probably only have so many in your life.
Oh, yeah.
Of those where you peer over the edge and you take a big step anyway. It's kind of like I remember Mark Allen, who was one of the greatest triathletes of all time, and he said, I believe I had 5 or 6 of those in my life that I was allowed to have. And I used to think about that as an athlete myself. And if I look back at my own career, it's kind of like, it's 5 or 6 times where I like, that went above and beyond expectation. On that, you've picked skiing as your career. What have been some of the ultimate highs that you've had? And that doesn't have to always be about the win, but any moments in your career that really stand out to you?
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't say one of them was, of course, winning the gold medal with Kikkan in PyeongChang.
But the way you did that, it wasn't like anybody listening to this podcast right now, jot down, go check out the 2018 team sprint and watch Kikkan Randall and Jessie Diggins race that as a team. And that second leg, yes, your sprint finish was out of this world, but you go through it 3 times. So people that don't know, you each person does a 1.25K each and then tag it to the next person. They do that 3 times each. And the second leg, it seemed that that was, I don't know what the times were like, but that seemed to me like it was outstanding.
Thank you. I mean, it's fun because I talk about this in detail. I walk you through exactly what I'm thinking. And in the moment in my book, and the first leg, I was like, this pace isn't fast enough. And I think our best chance to get a medal is to try to blow the field apart. And it's either going to work or it's going to backfire. But it ended up working, and that's where that lap decided that we were going to get a medal. Yeah. And then the last lap was just like, well, what color is it going to be?
And then that finish.
But I think honestly, the reason it's one of my favorites isn't because of the racing at all, although it was some of the best tactical skiing in my life. But it was that moment when I got up from the snow. Kikkan had tackled me, and just feeling her joy. I was like absorbing the feeling that we had together, and then getting up and turning around and seeing our whole team right alongside the finish boards, and seeing coaches like crying, like openly just sobbing because this crazy moment had finally come for us, for our team, because of everyone on the team. Like, that was so cool, that team celebration, and that feeling of getting to scream and celebrate with all these super important people to me who really do feel like family. Like, that was amazing. And I think one of my other favorite moments was from this past Olympics. And it's one where I didn't win, but it felt like a win. Oh my gosh. And I had food poisoning 30 hours before the start of the last race of the Olympics, like actually the last race of the Olympics. We got our medals at closing ceremonies in Beijing in 2022. And it was the women's 30-kilometer race. It was a mass start. And it was on top of the food poisoning having depleted me quite a lot.
Wow.
I had been, I was lucky in that it was a pretty light case. You know, I've definitely had worse, but it also wasn't ideal. You know, instead of going and testing my skis, I was laying in bed and eating chicken noodle soup out of a can because I was like, no way am I going back to that dining hall. Like, not going to do it. This is terrifying to me now.
Wow.
And the weather was insane. You know, like it was so
I've seen the visuals
cold.
of it. I don't know how it looked awful for someone who loves summer, and I haven't had a winter in 30 years. That is not something that looked attractive remotely. The weather was horrific.
I love the cold too. Like, I can stand a lot of cold, but it was so cold, and they actually moved the race time because of the cold. And the wind was, you know, if it wasn't windy, I think it would have been fine. But, you know, you get that wind chill factor in there. And that is where you really feel it. That's where you feel it, like basically just going right through you. And I ended up skiing basically the last maybe 20 kilometers of that race alone. And then for 17K of those, I was cramping as well. And so I was falling apart, and I somehow made it to that finish and collapsed and literally could not get back up. I had to get like carried out, and like my face was white. I couldn't see. Like, that was one of those races where I truly had to dig for 100%. And it really cost me. You know, the whole rest of the season, I was trying to dig myself out of an energy hole.
No way.
The cost of that was huge. But that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I can do this, you know, like cramping doesn't have to necessarily be the end of this, and skiing alone and making poor tactical decisions doesn't have to be the end of this. Like, that was amazing. And I think that came around to help me this season. Obviously, winning world champs was huge, but one of the more cool emotional experiences was when we finally got to race as women. We got to race 50 kilometers on the World Cup. And so a little bit of like history for those who don't know this. So back in the day when women first were allowed to ski race on the World Cup circuit, I know this because there's this incredible, awesome book called Trail to Gold, and it's the story of all the women who have represented the United States in cross-country skiing at the Olympic level. And there's not that many of us because we haven't been allowed to do it for that long. And I got to help a little bit with this book project. It's so cool. And hearing the stories from these women, you know, what they had to do to get a place, you know, to get a bib was incredible. And the fact that, you know, the race organizers had an ambulance waiting at the finish line because, you know, maybe your ovaries would fall out from racing. Maybe you'd die. Who knows, really? Because women, you know, can't possibly survive this hard of a sport was the sort of thought, you know what I mean? Like, and nowadays it's like, well, there should always be a medical team just in case at any sporting event for anyone. It's not about gender. It's just about safety protocol. But it was super insulting that it was like, well, this is for the women in case they can't make it. And that's, you know, that line of thinking is why women didn't get to race 50 kilometers. We were relegated to 30 kilometers instead, which is an entirely different race. I mean, it's a 20 kilometer difference. And to me, that was super upsetting because I grew up getting to do everything that the boys did. You know, I was one of the best athletes in the school before puberty hit. Back in elementary school, I grew up with, you know, a lot of cousins who were all around my age and all boys. And I loved, you know, we were just running around, you know, playing sports, climbing trees, doing all this stuff. And it was so fun. And I felt like I'm exactly on the same playing field. And obviously I know there's, you know, differences between male and female athletes, you know, testosterone and all that. But I felt like, well, shouldn't I have the same opportunity to challenge myself? You know, that's my whole thing. Like, I want to dig deep and see what's down there at the bottom of the well. And I want that same opportunity to grind it out for 50K, right? Like,
I'm amazed at it because, you know, in the world of triathlon, we've been from day one, Ironman, Olympics, doesn't matter. It's all the same.
Right.
Men and women, all the same. And I must admit, when I was watching all these videos and I was looking at often the distances and the women's race would be 15K, what was it? 7.5K, like the team relay, the sprint team relay, and the men's was 15K. And there were all these different distances. And I was like, what? That makes no sense to me. Makes zero sense. I'm really amazed that skiing is still so archaic with this stuff. Like, it's still there.
Right. Well, so what's super, super cool is there's been this push to have equal distance now. And so this past season was the first season where we got to have equal distance on the World Cup. Great. Every race was the same. Yeah. And it was so cool.
Yeah.
And I know, there's some tweaking about, okay, so we're going to keep it equal distance, but what should the distances be? We want a wide variety so that different skill sets can shine. I think that's spot on. That's right. So personally, I felt so empowered. And because my whole thing is that I want girls to be in sport, right? I want them to feel empowered. 100%. I want them to feel challenged, motivated. I want them to learn how to fail with grace. I want everyone to be able to learn that, because sports teaches you how to do that. It's so important, right? Because you need to learn how to not succeed at something, learn some lessons from it, dust yourself off and get back in it. And sport teaches that so well. So I think everyone should have the opportunity to be in sport. It's so important. And so for me, this season was so empowering to have equal races. And so getting to do a 50-kilometer race at the iconic Holmenkollen venue in Oslo, Norway for the first time, like, that was something I had thought about for months and months and months. Like, this race was maybe as important to me as World Championships. It was super emotional.
And it's a big difference going from, an hour 20-ish to 2 hours 15 kind of thing. Like, it adds a lot, right?
Oh, yeah. It's super different. And, it's fascinating because I don't necessarily know that, having done that, and of course it was also great conditions, right? So that's something to be said about it. If you had the same conditions of super slow snow and high winds that we had at the last Olympics, it would have taken quite a bit longer.
Of course. But you would have got through it. You would have paced yourself differently and you would have got through it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But we could do it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think it was any harder than a 30K because you had to pace it differently.
Of course.
It was just different.
It's just pacing it. What I've loved about you, and is this all skiers, or the versatility, the fact that you do every distance at the Olympics, from the short team relays to the 30 or 50K now. What is your preference when you look at all of those?
Oh, I just do everything because I was never a standout at one thing. So I was
really?
I better do it all.
I'll just be a standout at all of them then.
Well, I was like, I better give myself my best chance by doing all of it.
Yeah.
So, and also truly, I love all the different kinds of racing, right? Our sport is so fun in that you have skate and classic. So two entirely different techniques. And then within the two of them, you have everything from a sprint, which might be 2.5 minutes, all the way up to a 50K, which might be, 2 hours and 15 minutes. And then you have all these things in between. And it's so fun to push yourself in different ways. Can I have the endurance, but can I also have the tactics, the speed, and the power? I want to have it all. And I know that sounds really selfish. Like, I don't want to limit myself, like I want to see how I can stretch myself in different directions. And I find that really fun.
Your threshold must be off the chart. your VO2 and your ability to stay at a high percentage of that VO2 must be really significant. You don't have to give me all the numbers, but it's pretty high.
Well, actually, so this is funny. I haven't tested my VO2 max in a very long time.
Who wants to test it?
What I do remember
Yuck.
was going to, I went to like a junior camp a long time ago, and, somebody tested my VO2 max, and they were basically like, well, this is like unremarkable. And my tests weren't amazing. I wasn't the strongest. I couldn't do an amazing amount of pull-ups. It was respectable. Like, I wasn't super weak, but I wasn't super strong. I didn't have an incredible VO2 max. I'm not, I think that's what I love about it, is because I'm very, very human. I was, average in these different categories. I don't have incredibly high fast twitch muscle fibers where like I'm not the fastest out of the gates in a sprint. And I'm the first to say, like, I've made a lot of tactical errors where I'm like, oops, I really wish I could try that again in a different way. But I think that's what is so cool about this sport is you can succeed without necessarily being the best at all these things. You just have to work your way up and become a little bit better every day in all these different categories. And you have all these different ways in which you can improve, the mental side being a huge part of it. And that part you can't measure, which I think makes it really fascinating, right? Because you could be the best in the world and just give up.
I love the sports psychology. I actually, I just had on the show Dr. Simon Marshall, who's a world-renowned sports psychologist, and he actually just wrote the screenplay with his wife, All Quiet on the Western Front. So he's moving from being a sports psychologist into screenwriting. But anyway, this chatting with him about the brain and the way the brain talks to itself and the science that's coming out of it. One part of me is like, I don't want to learn too much more about it. I kind of love that, we all just try and figure it out as we go. But it's amazing that what's between your ears and how it connects to the diaphragm and talks to the diaphragm and how it connects to the gut and then talks back to the gut. And the body is talking to itself constantly and monitoring constantly both ways. And they've never realized it was both ways. Always go the brain talks to the gut or whatever, but it's like, oh no, the gut's talking to the brain and the heart's talking to the brain and the diaphragm's talking to the brain. And the way that we're actually corresponding between the two now, that the science, what you're saying is spot on. Like we can talk about VO2 max or hematocrit, or we can talk about all these individual things, but quite often it's this, what's going on between your ears and the way that it's computing with the rest of the body. It's fascinating where we're going. And I believe that's where the big advancements are going to be in sport in the future here. It really is going to be on who can manage the brain and the way it works with the entire body.
I mean, I agree. This stuff is so fascinating, and you can make it super technical or you can make it pretty basic. Like I remember my mom used to tell me as a kid, she'd say, whether you think you can or not, you're right.
Yeah.
And I don't remember who that quote is from. So sorry about that. But it's so true. Like if you decide you can't do something, well, then you probably won't. And if, like nobody wins by accident, and if you decide that you can, well, then you're going to reach your full potential, whatever that is. Because you're going to allow yourself to deploy the resources to go for it. And I think like at the very, very basic level, like you decide if you're going to go for it or not. And you need to commit one way or the other. But I think, the mental side of sport to me is so fascinating. And I think it's, it's sort of something that I'm always working on. And that's where I think some of those breakthroughs can really happen, because you can only keep training up to a level, right? Like there's only so much the body can take before you're risking more injury. So you have to train smart. You have to train hard and smart. And then you look for the ways to improve your performance that, aren't going to risk your body and your long-term health. Mm-hmm.
I have a quote from Dr. Tommy Wood, who's on the show a bit, and he said, what you think has a direct impact on your physiology. And it's exactly what your mum is saying with your quote. But I love this one because it's like if I'm thinking anything in any moment, it's actually having an effect on my physiology, whether it be hormones or whatever else, whatever I'm thinking in that moment. And this is the power of visualization and word affirmations and all of these things. The science is now proving this to be 100% fact, right? It's not, we used to sort of, what you think, yeah. But now it's actually been proven. A mini break to remind you to go check out AnyQuestion on iOS or Android, or you can go to anyquestion.com. You can actually go to anyquestion.com/Jessie Diggins, and you can see over 140 of Jessie's answers already there, and you can ask her follow-up questions after this podcast. So go check it out, anyquestion.com/Jessie Diggins. I want to move on and just talk about your book, Brave Enough. I've heard numerous people say how much they've loved it. What inspired you to write it to begin with?
You know what? It actually wasn't my idea. No, I'm serious. It really wasn't. After the 2018 Olympics, like right after. I mean, like the day after closing ceremonies, Kikkan and I flew to New York and we did a bunch of media. And I was really gung-ho on using this opportunity to push for the Minneapolis World Cup to happen, right? Because I really wanted a World Cup to happen in the United States. I wanted it to happen in Minnesota. So that was basically my sole focus. But along the way, I had this meeting with an editor at a publishing house. And this editor was like, I kind of like stumbled upon your blog. And then I went down into a wormhole of your posts and I kept reading and I thought this could be an interesting book. And, I kind of was like, I don't have time to write a book. No one's going to want to read what I have to say. Anyways, I don't have that remarkable of a story. And at this point, I had not told anyone about my eating disorder yet.
Really?
I hadn't been ready to come out with it. I didn't want that to be, I guess I had a lot of fear that I would be known as the eating disorder girl.
Right.
And that would be the way people saw me. That'd be the way they talked about me. That would be all the questions I would be asked the entire Olympics. So I was like, this is not the time for me to talk about this. And I honestly just didn't have the courage to come out with it earlier. And I wasn't in the right place mentally either. But after that, it kind of got the wheels turning. And I ended up deciding, okay, if I have a co-author so that, I'm not alone in this, which makes sense, right? Like I'd never written a book before. I didn't know what I was doing. You don't try to train for a sport without a coach.
Yeah.
Right. So Todd Smith was just wonderful and we really connected. And so he was my co-pilot. And I had done enough writing blogs, which obviously is super different than writing a book, but I had an established voice. I kind of knew how to tell the story that I wanted to tell. And so many hours later, we had this book manuscript. And along the way, I was kind of like, this is where I do need to talk about the eating disorder, because at the end of the day, when I thought about it, I was like, all right, selling the story of, here's how we won the first ever gold medal for the US. That's what's going to get somebody to buy the book maybe. But the real message that I'm interested in telling is, here's what it was like to be inside the mind of someone suffering from an eating disorder. I want parents to understand. I want friends, teammates, coaches to, here's a way to find some compassion and empathy and understanding of this is what it might feel like. Every eating disorder is different, of course. So, one person's lived experience is probably going to be very different from someone else, but through understanding my experience, it might help somebody learn to recognize, these are potential red flag warning signs, and here's things that were really hard for her. It was really hard for Jessie to have somebody comment on her body and size and appearance. And to be honest, it's probably hard for most people. Most people don't love having someone else make their opinion about their body known, right? Like that's not like super helpful for most people, but that was the driving force behind the book and what got me fired up enough to put in the time and the work to do it.
I love it.
So that's why I'm proud of it.
Yeah. Well, did you find the process, to find the courage to be vulnerable? Did you find that it came easily, or did that take a little bit as well to sort of realize, hang on, I'm actually saying this out loud? Was that a difficult process in itself? Yeah,
that was hard. Because obviously my parents knew, or I guess I shouldn't say obviously, but in my case, my parents were the ones who really walked me through treatment. And so they knew my whole story already, right? Yeah. So I had people who already knew it and supported me and didn't look at me differently because of it. And I had told my boyfriend at the time, Wade, before we were engaged, I had told him all about it, and he was so loving and supportive and was just like, I'm so glad you shared this with me. I want to be there for you. And that was just so awesome. So I'd had some really positive feedback in terms of, okay, I shared the most vulnerable, darkest part of me with someone. And they said, thanks for sharing. I love you. That was the response. And that was so huge for me. And so that gave me a lot of courage.
Yeah.
And so I had to share with Todd, my co-author, all right, here's the story. And he was like, okay, I'm going to buckle up, like I'm ready. And he also responded with such compassion and empathy and basically like, we got to tell all of this because people are going to need to hear even the hardest parts. And so that was some encouragement that I definitely needed because I was pretty scared. But to be honest, the process of editing and writing and rewriting, it was like really needed because I don't know if I had truly healed from what I had been through, because at the time I went to treatment at the Emily program and it saved my life. And I was so focused on just saving my life that it was like, I was just like running and I couldn't look back. I was just like, I got to get through this. I got to get to a better place. I was just so focused on doing the work to get to a healthy place, which is what I needed. But I never grieved for what I had been through. And wow, it's kind of hard to talk about. But I still remember sitting at the desk in the hotel room at the Hotel Kulm in Davos, where we always stay, and just like sobbing over my computer because I was reading my own words about my experience and having to go through and edit it and just like finally processing what I had been through and being like, oh my God, this was so hard on my family. This was absolute hell for me. I like really needed to actually like grieve for what I had gone through. And that process was so cathartic. And it really like allowed me to have the courage to talk about it. Cause I had obviously faced it head on while I was going through it, but then I faced it head on in revisiting it. And sometimes in really detailed ways, like, cause I wanted to make sure I got it right, you know, for the book. So it was like, here's, you know, the exact sort of things we talked about in our group, you know, I wanted to get it as accurate as possible. And that was really, really hard, but that made me feel like, okay, I'm capable of talking about this to other people, because I've had to have the chance to heal from it myself. So that was really good for me. And so I think the process of writing the book, you know, the driving force was to do this so that other people could learn about it. But in return, I ended up having this unexpected gift of a lot of healing for myself, which I didn't realize that I needed, and I didn't realize I was going to get.
Yeah, it's another round of therapy, right? I mean, it's like to actually write it down and know that you're sharing it. So being as detailed as you were.
Oh, yeah. It was amazing.
I have a quick question I want to ask on all of this, because the impact on the book on others, what's the feedback been? And have you found a lot of other athletes coming out of the woodworks and sharing their stories? Because even me as a guy in professional sport, endurance sport for sure, this is not just for young women. It's goes across sports, and it tends to be people that are all trying to get everything they can out of themselves, and so they're looking for anything and any way they can be better. And it's kind of like this process of what can I do? Have you found that feedback from other athletes coming?
I really have. And I love that you said that, Greg, because it's so true. There's this super harmful thing about eating disorders. Well, they're super harmful in the first place, but then it's harmful because there's sort of this taboo around talking about it. And then there's this myth that this affects skinny, white, teenage women, right? Like, but that's not true. This affects all ages, all gender expressions, all backgrounds. It doesn't matter what race you are. You know, anyone can be affected and severely affected by an eating disorder. And so this idea that for some reason out there, like, oh, you know, that's something that happens to, you know, wealthy teenage girls is a real problem because it prevents people from reaching out to seek care because they feel like they don't fit into this box of who's allowed to have an eating disorder, right? So I think that's super important to acknowledge and to talk about. But yeah, the feedback from the book, those fears I had previously mentioned, well, they weren't unfounded. I thought I was just amazed at how I don't feel like I'm the eating disorder girl. People still treat me exactly the way they did before. Mm-hmm. But if anything, with more respect because of how vulnerable I made myself. I pretty much put my soul out there, and I had so much positive feedback. And I have to say, it was the coolest thing hearing from coaches who are like, all right, I coach young athletes, and this was so important for me to learn about. And now I'm going to go out and educate myself, and I'm going to have resources that I can direct my athletes to. So if a problem arises, I'm going to know what the red flag signs are, and I'm going to have someone I can refer them to right away. And I'm like, yes, this is what we need, we need coaches who are super in tune to this and aware of it, and acknowledging that they have an amazing opportunity to redirect someone before they fully go off the rails, right?
That's the best part about the book. It's like the call to actions, right? It's like, it's not just, I'm just sharing a story. It's like, no, these are the red flags and this is what you should do.
Exactly.
And I think having that as a guidebook for, like you said, coaches, parents, it's such a great book for that alone. I mean, it's great. You've got some great stories in there and everything else. It's a phenomenal book. But that alone, just knowing what do you got to look for, and then what actions can you take. So, massive congrats on the book.
Oh, thank you. And I have to say, one of the biggest things about eating disorders is that they are so isolating. Right? And you can feel so alone, and it's so hard to talk to people about it. And I just want people to know they're not alone. And the number of messages I've received from people who are like, hey, I read your book or I heard about your story, and, that was me. I suffered from an eating disorder too. Or, young men who are like, hey, I just decided to go seek treatment for my eating disorder, and I'm feeling inspired and ready to work on recovery. It is so cool to hear that people are finding the courage to go out there and put their health first, because that is so hard to do, especially in the face of an eating disorder and in the face of, the culture that we live in, right, in our society, that will sometimes prioritize go, go, go above anything else. And I just have to say, people, you're not alone. You're not the only person. I've heard from so many people, which on the one hand is heartbreaking that so many people have had or are experiencing currently eating disorders and how tough that is. But at the same time, know that you're not alone. You didn't do anything wrong. You're not, I often felt like, oh my God, I'm such a freak for this and that. And no, you're not. This is not your fault. I mean, you're not the only person who's ever gone through this, and you're not the only person who will go through this and find recovery. That's super possible. There's so many people who have stood exactly where you're standing right now, who are now having happy, healthy lives. And so it's so possible. And we know it is because we've seen it. We've seen it happen. So I think that's just something that I hope people take out of this.
Jessie, well said. I am conscious of your time, and I do want to finish up with just a few more questions, if I may. And I've got a final 4. Are you up for a couple more questions before I let you go?
Absolutely.
All right. What advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Oh, 18 was a tough one for me. When people are like, oh, high school is the best time of your life.
Oh,
nope,
no, not me. Not me. Get me out of there. Yeah.
Get me out. I would say to my 18-year-old self, the biggest advice I need to give is you do not need to be perfect. And I know that right now you feel like you have to be perfect in everything you do. You're just trying so hard at everything. And that's great that you want to give a full effort to things that's going to serve you well in life. But you also need to learn that people will love you even if you aren't perfect. So definitely, give something your best shot, but then let it go and declare yourself satisfied with the results of your best effort, even if that isn't perfection.
Great advice. I want to share something with you. It's we had a neighbor of ours, and she was telling me that women in particular tend to go for perfection. And if you actually look at a lot of women's sports, they're quite often the scoreboard sports. And men tend to just want to be better than the other person, the other man. It's not about being perfect for men. It's about just outdoing the other man. And that's why men's sports tend to be, outscoring each other and not about perfection. It was just an interesting illustration when you brought up perfection. It made me think about how in our culture, to some degree, in our DNA, it's almost women tend to search for perfection. It's like, no. Do the best you can, right?
Yeah. And the best you can is going to be good enough because it's your best effort.
Yeah.
And it's not fair for anyone to expect perfection of you. And you wouldn't expect perfection of anyone else. So why do you expect perfection out of yourself?
I love that.
Right?
Great answer.
Yeah.
Okay, which 3 people, non-family, living or dead, would you want to have dinner with?
Oh, well, that's interesting.
3 people. This is always a fun one, by the way. If you're at a dinner party and it gets a bit quiet, throw this one in.
Oh, man. Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yes, well done. Yep.
Michelle Obama. I loved her book. And I feel like it'd be really interesting to have a historical figure in there. Abraham Lincoln. Be interesting to hear some perspectives.
Nice.
In that time period.
I love it. All right. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Oh, well.
You're 31, right? You're 31?
Yeah, I'm 31.
So you'll still be very young.
I still so much to do. I see myself, whether or not I'm racing, I'm definitely giving back a lot and involved quite a lot with cross-country skiing. I'm really happy in my marriage with Wade. Maybe we have a dog at that point, a really cute little fluffy thing. I don't know. That can also run on trails. And I'm still working and super involved with the Emily program and their mission and Share Winter and Protect Our Winners. So I see myself still just really getting after the work with all those organizations.
And last one here. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Ooh.
Or maybe your mum's quote the other. I
was going to say, yeah, maybe we've already talked about it.
You've already covered it. You've already covered it.
Whether you think you can or not, you're right.
Yes.
That's pretty good.
I think that's pretty outstanding advice. Well done, Mum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you up for finishing? And these are rapid fire questions, like super quick.
Oh, okay. Yeah. These are fun.
Some of them will stump you, and if they do, you can say pass. But
okay.
One book you'd recommend?
Oh, Lauren Fleshman's new book, Good for a Girl.
2 most used apps on your phone?
Instagram and Google Calendar.
I love it.
I'm serious.
That's great. I love it. It's so true, isn't it? All right. The toughest race you've ever done?
Oh, the 30K in Beijing 2022.
We covered that. Doing that with no fueling at all, brutal. All right. This one's really important, and I've already got a number for you. Out of 10, how cool are you?
Oh, man, I'm like a 4. I'm not super cool.
Please. Oh, my gosh. If you're not cool, where does that put the rest of us? My goodness.
Well, there will be no photographic evidence given to this podcast of what I was like in high school and junior high. But
what have you become? That makes it even cooler, don't you see? I love that. I mean, it's a silly question, obviously, but it is a fun one. All right. Who would you want to play a movie of your life?
Oh, like to play me?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Come on.
Maybe like Reese Witherspoon.
Nice.
Yeah.
I could see that. You just crushed that. you had that loaded.
No, I'm just thinking, I was like, who's like somewhat like similar height and like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I get it. Big smile.
I don't know that many names.
I love it. That's fantastic. Which decade of music is the best?
I'm a real sucker in the gym for 2000s pop.
2000s pop. I love it. Okay. Favorite race you've ever done?
I might say right now, maybe just because it's recency bias, but the 50 kilometers at Home and Colon, especially because my parents were there.
Oh, I love that.
And it was historic.
I love, by the way, you've mentioned your parents throughout this episode and your team, and you're very conscious about your team and your family. And It's truly inspiring. It's fantastic. Where is somewhere you haven't been you'd like to go?
Ooh, I really want to go to Argentina. Yeah, we went down to South America some years ago. We went to Peru and did the hike to Machu Picchu, and it was like maybe the coolest trip of our lives. It was incredible. And I'm just thinking, like, there's so many other places in South America that we just haven't even...
You've only scratched the surface.
We got to get back there.
Isn't it funny? The more you travel, the more you realize you haven't been anywhere.
Exactly.
It's the most bizarre thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I loved it down there. I just absolutely fell in love with the mountains there. So that would be a cool trip.
That would be cool. Okay, last one. Greatest movie of all time.
Ooh, Miracle on Ice.
Nice.
Because I love cheesy sports movies.
We all do. Well, Jessie, this has been absolutely wonderful. What's next for you? You're heading up to Bend, you said. How long until that happens?
Yeah, camp starts May 6th. So I'm traveling a bit for some speaking events. Going to go see my family in Minnesota for a little bit. And just excited to go see a bunch of cool people.
Well, I'm a huge fan. I was a fan before we had this conversation. I'm a bigger fan now. But everything you're doing, honestly, from your conservation, your book, the way you're trying to help people with eating disorders, you're racing. You're such an inspiration there just to watch. But I truly appreciate you coming on and spending a good chunk of your day chatting with me. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. It truly is an honor to be on here, and it's fun to get to talk about all these things. And thank you. You had some great questions. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jessie. And for everybody listening, you can go ask follow-up questions to Jessie at AnyQuestion.com/Jessie Diggins. And you can also find all the show notes and timestamps and everything else at BennettEndurance.com/media.
Thanks a lot for listening. If you enjoyed the show, your support would truly be appreciated. You can visit the Patreon page, or you can subscribe with your podcast app of choice. Don't miss the next episode, so subscribe and be notified. For show notes, if you want to know more, please visit BennettEndurance.com. I'm Phil Liggett, and on behalf of Greg Bennett, here's to the next time, and I hope you will join Greg again very soon.